Expedition by Rachel Cherie. Opening her eyes, Elise found herself laid out on a tiny, hard mattress just inches above a cold metal floor. She looked about, but didn't recognize her surroundings. The ceiling and walls were indiscernible, hidden from her by darkness. After blinking a few times, she pushed herself slowly into a sitting position. When she did, she found her limbs burned with a terrible ache, and her head pounded with her every heartbeat. Reaching up to her eye, she winced at the gentle pressure of her fingertips. It was then that she noticed a small white circle on her wrist. Elise looked down. They were dotted all across her body, arms, legs, torso, and her temples, about 10 in total. She frowned at her exposed skin and the foreign white romper she was wearing. "Where am I?" she whispered. She smacked her tongue and tried to swallow, fighting the dryness of her mouth. "Where are my clothes?" Near the uncomfortable bed, she noticed a shimmery olive-green blanket crumpled on the floor. She carefully picked it up with her thumb and index finger, leaned forward, and sniffed it, finding it to be odorless, and, upon further inspection, seemingly clean. She wrapped it around her bare shoulders and shakily got to her feet. Once she was upright, she peered into the darkness. "Hello? Can anyone hear me?" She cringed at the raspy sound of her voice. Squinting, she could barely make out walls on 3 sides of her, so she turned to the void where the fourth wall could have been. "Is anyone there?" She scratched at the white circles adhered to her skin, then sighed. "Don't go toward the forbidding darkness, Elise," she whispered to herself. However, despite her reservations, she forced herself forward and extended one hand in trepidation as the other clutched the blanket around her. After a few steps, her hand pressed against something with a warm, tingly feeling to it. The surface of a 6 by 6 foot area transformed into an iridescent pink at her touch. Then it fell away like sand, which let in more light. She looked up. "Ah! Ah!" a man across from her screamed back. They both moved to cover more of themselves, but were unable to do more than the blankets and undergarment-type clothing would permit. Who are you?" she gasped. Regaining his composure, the man straightened. "Sorry, ma'am. I'm Major Clark. You're the civilian, ain't you? Lewis?" "Oh, yeah, I see it now. I recognize you from your picture. But please, don't call me ma'am." As she spoke, she poked at the now transparent barrier that remained after the black opacity had dissolved. "Of course, Miss Lewis," he agreed in an irritated tone. "Are you all right?"
Mostly, I think."
She forced a smile while she tried to downplay the pain of her aching body.
And you?"
"I'm okay." He glanced around, then refocused on her. "Can you see anyone else?"
"No, just you,"
she replied.
Did you, uh, did you have the black and then the pink?"
She wiggled her fingers to mimic what she'd witnessed. "Yes, ma'am."
"Oh. Could the rest of the crew be here, do you think? What happened? Where are we?"
Suddenly, panic squeezed the air out of her lungs. She clutched the blanket tighter as her respiration increased to rapid, ragged breaths. Major Clark winced as he watched her. "Miss, remain calm. Breathe. You've got to breathe." With her voice trembling, she asked again.
"What happened?"
"I don't know, Miss Lewis," he answered. Then he shifted his weight on his feet. "I remember the giant thing outside Charlie's window. It was huge. Massive. We couldn't do anything except watch it smash into our ship. To be completely honest, I don't know how we're alive right now." She shuddered, sank back onto the bed, and pulled her knees to her chest.
"Maybe we're not."
"Don't think like that, Miss Lewis," he said softly. His Texas accent sounded warm in the cold. Listen, do you have your clothes or any personal items? No. No, I'm just in this romper thing, she answered. I don't have my phone or my bag or anything. Right. Yeah, I got these shorts, see, and this weird blanket. He gestured to the apparel. She glanced up. His skin was a dark tan against the white fabric of the shorts, and the blanket did little to hide his perfectly toned physique. With an awkward nod, she returned her eyes to the floor. Yep. Do you have those white circles on you too? She glanced around her body at them. Yeah. What are they? Then she looked back at him. And where are yours? I took them all off. If someone wants to monitor me, they can come do it face to face. Did it hurt? She asked, picking at the one on her left wrist. Just a little bit. He watched her a moment as she trembled and shivered. Taking a breath, he scooted as far forward as the detention field would allow. Listen, Miss Lewis, I know you're scared, and that's okay. So let's talk. Instead of speculating about what we don't know, let's just talk about what we do know for a minute, all right? She winced as she pulled the circle off her wrist. You okay? He asked. It feels like pulling off a Band-Aid. Attached with super glue, she said through her teeth. Inhaling slowly, she started on another one. Okay, what do we know? How about you tell me your name, We'll start with the basics. She pulled off another circle. Elise. I'm Elise Lewis. All right, then. Elise Lewis, I'm Major Rick Clark. I live in Arizona. You? I would have guessed Texas by your accent. She grimaced while she continued to work on another circle. I live in Oregon, right near the coast. I actually grew up in Texas, he said with a nod. My pop's family are Texans, born and raised for generations. While your mom is Filipino? That's right, the major grinned. You're very observant. She smiled, appreciative of his attempt at friendliness. I'm pretty good with accents and things. Is Rick short for Richard? She pulled off another circle. No, it's just Rick. He watched her peel off the circle on her right wrist. Elise, I'm going to do everything I can to get you back safely to your family, okay? Thank you. She swiped at her eyes, then nodded and attempted a smile of gratitude. I just wish we knew where we were. That? I believe I can clear that up for you. A new voice interrupted them. A man a few inches shorter than Rick with chestnut hair and kind eyes approached them. His accented voice was very rhotic, with soft vowels and hard consonants. He was dressed in an unfamiliar, medium gray uniform and had a name tag with lettering they'd never seen before. Who are you? Where are we? Major Clark demanded as the man walked down the way between him and Elise. And where are our clothes? She added as she struggled to a standing position while keeping herself half covered. He waited for them to quiet, then cleared his throat. We will do proper introductions later. For now, permit me to briefly introduce myself. I am Chief Aviator Ekniel Duprel, of the crew designation Dekra 926 aboard the Kelvrek, part of the Intergalactic Peace Service. He pulled out a device resembling a tablet. Do any of these names or titles have meaning to you? What are you talking about? Major Clark asked, scowling. Now, since your biomolecular structures are not registered in our database, Ekniel continued, we have to assume we have never encountered your kind before. Encountered your... What? Major Clark retorted. Is this a joke? It's a joke, ain't it? He began looking up and down the hallway. Charlie! Hey, Charlie! Joke? No. Eknial looked troubled. You said you are from Arizona. Yeah, that's where I live. Major Clark crossed his arms, furrowed his brow, and set his mouth in a straight line. Do you know your solar system's location on the United Free Territories star charts? Oh, no, you would not know that. He turned to Elise. You said you are from Oregon. Is that in the same solar system as Arizona? Her expression scrunched up in confusion. Is this a really elaborate prank? Are you a friend of Warren's? Warren. He studied her face. Oh, you are from the same planet. Of course. That would make sense. Crack. We have broken so many protocols. He let out a sigh and rubbed the back of his neck. This report is going to be complete Zogren. I am having to bypass basically all of our first contract procedures, so I do apologize. At least you're speaking English, Elise said sarcastically. Actually, I do not, he said. Permit me to explain. When we did our scans and saw your bodies did not contain the standardized biomechanoid translation microbots, we tested you for tolerance. When you passed the testing, we injected them. They colonize near the base of the brain, integrate with your neurophysiology, verify or learn your language upon establishment, and then transmit the update to the microbots network. I see concern in your faces. However, there is no need to worry. They are directly linked to your neural system, but they are harmless. They cannot be shorted out because of their biomechanoid construction. They are alive as long as you are alive. What they cannot translate are colloquial phrases, idioms, or informal language. Those you will have to learn on your own. Touching at the base of her skull, Elise found it tender. Injected? Are we really supposed to believe that? Rick asked cynically. I rather hoped you would, Ekniel said. He glanced down at his handheld touchscreen device. You should also be able to recognize the written form of all words you understand audibly. Major Clark scoffed. With a heavy sigh, Ekniel shook his head. Our science officer had been monitoring you by the adhesive biomedical scanners you so effectively removed from yourselves. But now he has some questions for you. His name is Vegron Mavner Edmeer, but he prefers to be addressed simply by his given name, Mavner. Will you speak with him? Rick and Elise exchanged glances. Why not? He can't be much different from you now, can he? The Major asked. Actually, Ekniel said with a smirk, he is. His epidermis is blue. Before they could react, the Chief Aviator pressed a badge on the right side of his collar. Chief Aviator Duprat of Vegron Etme Mavner, please join me and our new guests. They watched in disbelief as the scientist entered. Ekniel hadn't been lying. Mavner wasn't as tall as the Chief Aviator, though maybe his dark blue hair, parted down the middle and turned up in two symmetrical points, created the illusion he was. His skin was a medium cerulean blue, and his eyes were pale as ice. He wore pants like Ekniel's, but instead of the matching jacket, he boasted a black tunic and a long, light gray coat with at least a dozen pockets. Are we on drugs? Elise asked abruptly, looking past Mavner to Rick. I've never done them, but this is what they do, right? Rick's face grew somber. Not in my experience. That is my very, very limited experience. He and Mavner stared at each other. Well, knock me down and call me crazy. This is real, ain't it? You're real, ain't you? Mavner cleared his throat. I am, he said in an emotionless voice. Real? Clark, are you saying the blue guy is really blue? Elise scoffed. Are you serious? Let me be brief. Mavner pulled a device vaguely resembling a television remote out of one of his pockets. He pushed a button, which created a rotating hologram of a man's anatomical composition. This is you. He gestured to Rick. Obviously, we knew nothing of your physiology, so I took extensive scans of each of you. Afterwards, I ran comparisons. But with the injuries and other variables, I was having to estimate repair procedures. I was barely able to save the two of you. You took rins to recover, but you were more fortunate than your comrade. He stopped abruptly and looked at Ekniel, who was now glowering at him.
More fortunate? Rick took a step forward. Where's my crew? Tell me!
Turning away from Mavner, Ekniel walked forward and sighed.
3 men died when our vessels collided. Scans indicated that they were killed on impact. You 2 and a third were alive, but critical. We are still trying to stabilize your friend. We have been waiting for you to regain consciousness to see if you can help us save him. Elise covered her mouth in horror. Rick's expression grew dark and grim, but he nodded. Take me to him.